Happy Chinese New Year, or as is known in China, New Year. By the way, Chinese New Year is considered the more accurate name for this holiday, instead of Lunar New Year, which can be misleading because, for one, there are multiple different cultures around the world that use a lunar calendar. So the Chinese one that's usually around early February is not the only Lunar New Year, technically. Jews also have Lunar New Years, for instance. And for two, the Chinese calendar isn't even a lunar calendar. It's a lunisolar calendar. Sounds pretty lunatic. I know. What the hell is that? A lunisolar calendar. It basically means the calendar is based on both the phases of the moon and the seasons. So aka the trajectory of the sun over the year. Now that's necessary because otherwise, if the calendar is only based on the phases of the moon, then after a couple years you'll end up with winter in June and all kinds of lunacy. Sorry, Australia. But anyway. So to call it the lunisolar New Year, it's just too much. Plus, it also doesn't solve the other point of confusion I mentioned earlier, because you know who else also used the lunisolar calendar? Lots of other cultures, actually. But what do you call it in Chinese? Let's just translate that into English. Well, I told you already that won't work because we just call it New Year. Okay, we also call it the farmer's calendar's New Year, which is 农历三年 in Cantonese and 农历新年 in Mandarin. We also call it, I guess, the Spring Festival or Spring Holiday, if you prefer. But enough of that. Let's move on to what I actually want to talk about today, which is the most macabre New Year greeting. So, during Chinese New Year's, it's customary for people to give each other wishes, like how you'd say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and Happy Birthday. It's pretty standard across the cultures, except for Chinese New Year. The variation, the number of different greetings you can say, they're a lot more elaborate. For instance, you can say 新年快樂, which is Happy New Year. 身體健康, which means like I wish you good health. 出入平安, which means in and out safety, which means like I wish you a year without traffic accidents, basically. 萬事勝意, which means 10,000 things will be better than how you wish them to be. 龍馬精神, which means high-spirited as a dragon or a horse. 龍精虎猛, which means as energetic as a dragon or a tiger. 龍年大吉, which means have a good dragon year. So you might have realized that some of these are dragon-themed for the year of the dragon, which is this year. So you may be wondering, do we have different theme greetings for every year? Yes, there are literally hundreds of these greetings, which I think were created as memory exercise for kids, because you're supposed to force your kid to yell them out as quickly as possible whenever they see someone during the first 2 weeks of the new year. So what's this macabre greeting I'm talking about? And for those of you who are watching with children and think that this may be a light-hearted, family-friendly video, turn this off now because it's gonna get pretty dark. The greeting I'm talking about is 豬籠入水. So, what does that mean? The literal word-by-word translation would be pig cage enter water. But what does it mean to wish someone to have water entering a pig's cage? By the way, this greeting is more popular in the Cantonese-speaking areas, especially popular when it's the year of the pig because of the theme. But the Chinese pronunciation for 龙, which means cage, it's the same as 龙, which means dragon. Now, there are a lot of homophones in Chinese characters, not homophobes, just to clear things up. Not that there aren't any Chinese characters who are homophobes, characters meaning, wow, he's such a character, instead of the written kind of characters that I'm talking about. I get that joke was really convoluted and confusing. Anyway, homophones are words that share the same sound with other words, although the meanings are different. So the word cage and dragon in Chinese have the same sound. So the greeting 猪籠入水 is also technically on theme for the Year of the Dragon, which is this year that's coming up. Okay, so why is it macabre? Just because you're drowning a pig or something? What does it mean anyway? Pig cage entering water. So let's go a layer deeper in terms of its metaphorical meaning. So water in Cantonese slang means money, among other things. Now this slang, it depends on context. So now this slang doesn't really exist in Mandarin, which is why this greeting is also less popular in Mandarin speaking areas. But people do say it because Hong Kong is a very culturally important Chinese city, and so we do export quite a bit of our culture. But to wish someone 猪籠入水 is to wish someone to have money entering their bank account as quickly as water would get inside a pig's cage when it is submerged. Because pigs' cages are these bamboo cages with big ass holes, and so water would get in very quickly when you dunk it in water. By the way, another side note, there's a theory that the saying is originally 猪笼, which means bamboo cage in Mandarin, instead of 猪笼, which means pig cage. So another case of homophonic confusion. Because the cages in question are almost always made with bamboo anyway, so the word kind of evolve and merge over time, which is partly related to the rest of the story I'm about to tell. What I just said, this word confusion is disputed, by the way. Anyway, so you may ask, why so specific? Why say a pig's cage? Why not choose something else with big holes like a sieve? Or better yet, something that holds water like a bucket. Okay, there is actually a saying that's like that, pun mun put mun, which means like basin full, bowl full of water, etc. But why a pig's cage? Why not a boat with a hole? Who's dunking these pigs' cages into water? I'll tell you who did. People actually did. Was it to kill the pigs? That seems cruel. No, it wasn't to kill the pigs. It was to kill women. Specifically, women who committed adultery. So things like having premarital sex, or having sex with someone else's husband, or having sex with someone else after your husband died. Basically having sex with anyone who wasn't your one and only husband. Why a pig's cage? Oh, that's because they don't deserve to die like a human. So they should be killed like a pig so that they would reincarnate as a pig. Except you don't even kill pigs by dunking them in the water either, so it doesn't really make sense, I hear you say. Well, most atrocities don't make sense. What about the men? Do they also get drowned in a pig's cage? Sometimes, but it's less common. I have read about this. But everything's disputed, by the way. There's not a lot of really good documentation about these practices. But anyway, in general, these sexual kind of laws and restrictions, as it is true in most patriarchal cultures, which are most cultures, tend to be more oppressive toward women. Polygamy was pretty commonly practiced during dynastic China, for instance. So what's considered a crime for a woman, having sex with more than one person, already isn't considered a crime for a man. But men, too, are sometimes punished for adultery. Sometimes they will get beaten to death by a mob with wooden sticks, while the woman is drowned. And sometimes they will be drowned in a pig's cage with the woman as well. Actually, there was a pretty big stir just a few years ago when there was a guy in a remote village in Guangdong caught another guy who was fucking his wife. And so he and his buddies tied him up and put him in a pig's cage and threatened to drown him. And they recorded the whole video, of course, and put it on the internet to shame the guy. And then the people were like, what the fuck? And the police got involved, and everybody who was involved went to jail. Although they didn't actually kill the guy, I want to make it clear. But death threats are illegal too. Kids, don't do it. So it is unclear how often this was practiced even back in the days, because it was not, as far as I know, an official form of punishment used by the court system. Instead, it was something that was allegedly practiced in more remote and rural areas by like a mob or an official court seated by village elders. It also might be possible that this was something that was made up, or at least largely popularized by writers and historians. As in writers and historians from areas where people can read and write, from big cities. These writers and historians may have been consciously or subconsciously sensationalizing these practices for shock value, and more importantly, to kind of frame these uneducated villagers as barbaric and therefore dehumanizing them. And now that's something all cultures do. You're doing that in your head just now. Look at these Chinese people from this village here. They drown women. That's disgusting. Unlike us, who do not do that, and is therefore less disgusting. And that's how our subconscious work, and that's how I guess the propaganda driven by racism can be spread so quickly and easily. So as a caveat, I want to say the whole drowning woman in pig cages practice is, at least from my point of view, is a lot more famous as an overused TV trope for kind of period dramas than probably how common it actually was. But that aside, it's still a bit macabre to be using it as a New Year greeting, I think. But it's just one of those things, like you would say, riding shotgun, or he's off the chain. You can look those up if you don't know what I'm talking about. For now, Happy New Year, or as we say in Hong Kong, 恭喜發財, 仆你個街. My name is Yu Yun, and thank you for watching.